It's the 1 year anniversary of George Floyd's death. And there's a lot that we need to discuss. And I think I would do a disservice to the whole situation, to all that we've been through, not to talk about certain things we've learned since the death of George Floyd and how to put it in perspective and learn exactly what we should take away from it. With that being said, stay tuned.
1 in a million to one villain. Too hot to be in the kitchen, I'll end up melting the ceiling.
What's going on, Javier Lobby? It's your boy Javier with the Javier Show. Make sure you say it twice. If you're new to the channel, you like politics, religion, and culture, go ahead, hit that subscribe button below, hit the bell, you get notified of all my future videos. Please, thank you. Now, let's get into this whole 1 year anniversary of George Floyd's death. A lot has happened since George Floyd died. We've seen riots, we've seen protests, we've seen the election cycle come and go between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. We've seen so many different things. We dealt with the COVID-19 situation, the vaccines, and all of this, and people taking one side over the other side. A lot of times it feels like this 1 year has been like 3 or 4 years, to be honest with you. A lot has happened, and things move so fast in the media cycle, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around it and to digest what's really going on. A lot of misinformation, a lot of people using the information that we do have as a way to hammer home points that don't necessarily follow from the information that we gathered. It's so much to really understand. So I want to try to narrow it down to George Floyd's death, what we learned, and how it has a major impact, and what we should be thinking about moving forward. The first thing that I want to point out is that we just recently saw that Derek Chauvin was convicted of the murder of George Floyd. Not only did we figure that out, we also didn't hear anything about racism being one of the major factors in why he knelt on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes. They never came up in the trial. It has never been proven that he was a racist or that he had racism as a motivation to do what he did to George Floyd. It has never been shown. Now, we can acknowledge that fact without taking one side or the other side. Even if you're on the left, you can still agree that, hey, we have yet to prove racism was a motivating factor. But yet, to this day, there are still many people who are using racism as a reason why George Floyd is dead to this day. Now, this has been pumped up to the general conversation in America about policing. Reforming police, defunding the police, reallocating funds. Some people mean one thing when they say defund the police. Other people mean a different thing when they say defund the police. So it's really confusing. And it just depends on who you're talking to. Not only this is, George Floyd is one of the latest cases whereas a black man was killed or died at the hands of a police officer, where Black Lives Matter has taken up the mantle to fight for justice. I think we should always fight for justice no matter who it is. I think everybody deserves their day in court, and I believe that the court of law should be as fair as possible. And not only that, that we should take evidence as it comes without making assumptions beforehand. We saw a lot of that happen in the George Floyd case. We originally saw the video that was released, and later on, more and more videos came out that kind of showed a different picture of what was actually taking place. Whether or not that changed the outcome of the actual verdict, it really doesn't matter. It just goes to show you that you shouldn't jump to conclusions just based on one video when you don't have enough evidence to really come to that conclusion. Now, with that being said, I want to point this out because I think it's very important that we highlight this. A lot of the time that these people who claim to be for you, fighting for justice, fighting for equal opportunity or equity, or trying to combat racism, a lot of these people I really don't think has your best interests at heart. Now, we saw this with one of the Black Lives Matter leaders who went and bought a multi-million-dollar home just so that, you know, she could move into a better neighborhood. And for her to be a socialist, she really understands the fact that, well, capitalism is pretty good. When you got a family you need to take care of, when you have people who depend on you, you earn that money, therefore you should be able to spend it how you want. But I just bring this up to point out, does this lady represent all of the people who support Black Lives Matter? Of course not. But there's also a distinction between the Black Lives Matter organization and the people who support Black Lives Matter, the people who go out and want to seek justice. Whether you think they're right or wrong, I believe in your ability to go out and protest without being squashed by the government and hindering your freedom of speech. Of course we agree to that. But point this out. I made a video a while ago that, you know, racism means nothing. When you call racism everything you see or people you disagree with, you dilute the word, and it makes it hard for people to actually take you serious when you're actually dealing with a real racist. You have to choose your enemies properly. Choose the battles that you choose to fight, because how you fight those battles will make a major difference on who will side with you and who will think you're just looking for an enemy. And when you're a hammer, everything seems like a nail. Now, a lot is happening this year. We got the whole COVID-19 situation going on. A lot of people believe that due to the coronavirus, that the George Floyd case reached such a significant prominence due to that fact, because people didn't have jobs, people were at home, they didn't have anything to do, and this was a reason to get out and get active, to get some excitement in people's lives. Then the riot and the looting started. We had politicians taking cover for rioters and looters, saying mostly peaceful protests. Okay, let's say the protests were mostly peaceful. I'm willing to grant you that. I don't think most people who went out to protest started rioting and looting. I really don't think so, or at least they didn't have the intentions to do so. But once we realized that the rioting and looting started, I hold the people who was holding these protests accountable for making sure those things didn't take place and doing their best to discourage people from taking those actions. Now, there are people who are part of these movements who actually think violence is the way to go. I personally don't think violence actually helps anything. It only breeds and creates more violence, more distrust, more chaos, and more drama. And it doesn't do a service to George Floyd's name. Now, George Floyd, as we know, he had a problem with drugs and a criminal history. We saw a lot of people on the right side of the aisle who brought up these facts, and I'm on two sides with this, right? There are people on the left who thinks that those facts are irrelevant when it comes to the death of George Floyd. I would 100% agree with you. But where I don't agree with you is that these facts are relevant when you want to prop up somebody as being your hero, or prop up somebody as being a martyr, or prop up somebody as being a bigger than life figure than they actually was. You can tell both things and still come to the conclusion that maybe George Floyd shouldn't be dead to this day. Now, the evidence is still murky. How the jury came back and with the verdict that they did in the short amount of time that they did, I still question to this day. And that's fine. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm willing to say that I'm wrong, but I find it highly skeptical that they came to that conclusion that they did, given the evidence that we all saw. Now, here we are in 2021, a year later after George Floyd's death. What does that mean for our future? Okay, we still live in a society where there are people who are willing to see racism everywhere they look, everywhere they turn, everywhere they go. This cannot be the path that we take. I think it causes more harm than it does good. More people have died as a result of George Floyd's death than would have if he had not died. If that's the Derek Chauvin's fault, it may be. Is that the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement fault? Maybe. Is it for the nefarious people behind the scenes who are pushing certain political agendas and using the Black Lives Matter movement as a way to do so? Could be. There are so many different factors at play here. To narrow everything down to one specific solution is wrong. We will never do that, and we should never do that if you ever want to make progress on a particular issue. Sometimes we like to think of simplified solutions to very complicated problems, and that's just not the way we should be approaching this. So when it comes to the future, this is all I ask. In the name of George Floyd and all of those people who have suffered from police brutality, those people who claim to be suffering from police brutality and actually didn't after the evidence came out, we have to be able to pick and choose which cases are truly police brutality and which ones are not. And you also got to remember at the end of the day that police officers are human beings as well. If we need better training for police officers, I'm 100% behind that. If we need to do some kind of extra training or curriculum to make sure that police officers are equipped to handle different situations and to de-escalate situations, I'm 100% for that. But there are people out there who are just talking or starting off in places that you just cannot start and actually find a solution. Or the police should have shot in the air, or the police should have shot him in the foot. Anybody who knows anything about guns should know that certain solutions just will not work. Do not listen to these race hustlers. Do not listen to the people who are Blue Lives Matter head to toe and will never budge on anything. Do not listen to the radicals. The radicals are the ones who are destroying our country. That's the radical left and the radical right. And we should not allow these people to hijack our country and take advantage of our vulnerabilities. So this is a call to action. Whether you're on the side of whether George Floyd died because he had drugs in his system, or if you're on the side that he was brutally murdered, whatever side that you fall on, I'm asking you simply this. Talk to the people on the other side that you disagree with. Find out where you have common ground. Try to find realistic solutions. And let's be careful what we call racism and what we don't call racism, because it matters. It's very important. And we, the moderates, the people who are reasonable enough to have conversations with people we disagree with, let's take our country back. That's all I'm asking. So, with that being said, if you like the content, if you found value, all it takes is for you to hit that button down below. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. You get notified of all my future videos. Thank y'all so much for watching. The YouTube studio is almost finished. I'm almost there. And also, before you go, I'm releasing my mixtape on June 19th. I'll be releasing my mixtape, Forgotten Soldier. So be on the lookout for that. It will be released on a separate channel, but I will promote it on this channel, and I'll promote it on Facebook, Twitter, and all my other social media. Thank you so much for watching. With that being said, as always, peace and glory.
1 in a million to one villain. Too hot to be in the kitchen, out in the melting the ceiling.